Yeah. Good afternoon again, everybody, and welcome to Littleover. For those people who weren't there at the beginning of our time together as we were just eating lunch, we owe particular debt of gratitude to the Mayor for coming to share with us, Councillor Frank Harwood. Thank you very much for coming and sharing with us today. And also a number of local councillors who we really appreciate for the fact that you're here and sharing in our Bible Festival, which has been Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday this week. And a particular welcome as well to Reverend Paul Smith, who's a Methodist minister, comes to us from Devon. And it's good to have Paul among us today. We believe in Nottingham and Derby very much in building partnerships with our local community. And that we can only work in the context of our understanding of Scripture and the Bible when we actually engage in those partnerships. And as chair of the district, which I'll just explain to the Mayor, that we go from the top in Clare Cross, right the way down to about 10 miles south of Measham. Then we go across in the east in Lincolnshire to just past Grantham. And then in the west, about 5 or 6 miles past Uttoxeter. So we're sort of brain shape. And within that, we have 187 Methodist churches, of which some of those are ecumenical churches. But what's important about many of them is they're engaged in different ways in supporting their local communities. It might be through just the renting of the rooms, it might be through a food bank, it might be through a play group, lots and lots of different ways in which we try and share the love of God with our local communities. And we're investing, in fact, just on my way here, I was having a conversation about mission planning with someone about how we can enable people to look at the context of their local communities and find out what's happening in our local communities and how as churches can we join in. And so we've got lots of different partnerships across the piece, and we're very pleased that that's the way in which we engage in our mission as we share the love of God with our people. We're particularly grateful to Paul, who's been working with us in these last 3 days to think about what it means to be church. And today we're going to look at the caring of the local church. We care in lots of different ways, but Paul's just going to look at one particular Bible passage and look at that with us and help us to think about it in a bit more detail. So thank you, Paul. You can do that now, yeah?
Feel a bit funny about standing up, really. Very more to be sat in a circle and all very informal, wouldn't we, really? But I'm going to read. Am I in the wrong place with the mics?
Oh, sorry. Perhaps I should say something.
Say something.
Sorry. I forgot to say that everything's been live streamed.
Ooh,
So, and you can find it on the Nottingham and Derby Methodist Facebook page, and it'll also appear on YouTube as well. So that's why we've got the mics. That's why we've come down here, because it's much easier because everything's set up. And I'm assuming, Ian, that everybody who's sat in the positions where they are now are at some point or other on film, are they? Potentially. So if you don't want to be,
you have to move now.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Go over there. Please don't all go.
Yeah, move to the panel.
Otherwise, I'll be addressing empty chairs.
Thank you, Paul.
Oh, well. I'm just going to read, because it's a Bible festival, we ought to have a bit of Bible, really. So I'm going to read an iconic story that Jesus told. It's in Luke chapter 10. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell into the hands of robbers. They stripped him of all his clothes, beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, he passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan as he travelled, came down where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds and poured on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, took him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he gave 2 silver coins to the man who kept the inn and said, "Look after him, and when I return I will reimburse you if you have any extra expense." Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbour to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? Jesus asked. And the expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." And Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise." It's a very interesting thing that the story changes the meaning of the word. A Samaritan was somebody who came from Samaria, and if you're really clever, you've got a kind of picture of the map in your head, and we've got Judea and Jerusalem at the bottom bit, and Galilee at the top bit, and Samaria's in the middle. And I could explain it, but it'll bore you to death, so I'll not tell you, but ask me about it afterwards if you want to know. But for long historical reasons, the Jewish people in the south and the Jewish people in the north didn't have anything to do with the Samaritan people in the middle. In fact, when a Jew from the south wanted to get to the north, he would not put his foot onto Samaritan soil. He would walk round. So in Jesus' time, if you'd call somebody a Samaritan, it would have been the gravest insult. But actually, if you call a person a Samaritan today, it's a compliment. Because Jesus changed the meaning of the word. And the story has become woven into a kind of the fabric of our understanding, certainly in the Western world. And from the story we inherit phrases like passing by on the other side. And even though some people may use those phrases, they may not realize where it comes from. Well, this is it. And the story is about a most unlikely person exercising care in the community. It's about. And I think maybe a good place to start with this is to recognize that Christians have a good heritage in this regard, actually. For example, lots of things in our society that we take for granted now, but which are only here because of the Christian influence. Like holidays, for example. In the days when feudal barons ground people into the dust, the Christian church was the movement that said, hey, you need to give these people a day off one day now and again. Let's make it Christian festivals. So holy days became holidays. Or what about hospitals? Or what about the abolition of the slave trade? Or what about orphanages and schools? It's almost every stone you turn in our society for the things that we value most. Underneath, you'll find a Christian influence. So we have a lot of things to be proud of in this regard, and a great heritage. And we're in a Methodist church. We're not all Methodists. But I'm going to beat this drum a bit, really. Because I think amongst many of the denominations, Methodism has got a good track record here, actually. I think it was 6 of the 7 Tolpuddle martyrs were Methodists. Now, why were they? Why was that? Well, it was because when they became Christians, and when they became Methodists in particular, it kind of awakened the social conscience. And they began to say, it's not right that these farm workers are exploited. And if we're going to have justice for them, let's band together. And so they formed the union. You will know the story. And they were deported into Botany Bay as a consequence. And, Dr. Bernardo wasn't a Methodist, but he was a Christian. And we have our own Dr. Stevenson, who founded what we used to call the National Children's Home, which we now call something else again. Action for Children. Good. Was it? There you go.
I was here for.
You were? I'm sorry. You had a better offer. Dr. Stevenson, a Methodist minister, who was walking home and saw the kids playing in the gutter. And I think in fact, it's true to say, it was the first orphanage which he called a home, because he wanted to make it a home for them. So, the Christian church, and Methodism in particular, has got roots, really, into issues of care in the community, compassion and social justice, all these kind of things. So anything we can do to encourage that plant to grow is a really good thing. So I wanted to share with you just a snippet of my own experience, which is that I used to be a Methodist minister. I was 40 years in the ministry, and I retired 6 years ago. And my last term of office was in Plymouth in the West Country. And I was a minister at the Central Hall there, and I was there for 13 years. And one of the good things about that, there's lots of good things, but one of the good things was that the churches in the city really cooperated really quite closely together. And we had something called CTIP, Christians Together in Plymouth. I don't know if you've got something similar. Have you got something similar in Derby? Yes, okay. So, what I'm going to tell you, you could do actually. So what we did in Plymouth, we thought, how many hours of community service do Christians associated with our local churches contribute every week? So we conducted an audit. And a questionnaire went round to the churches, and it said, very difficult to do, try and identify how many hours of service to the community you as a church provide. So that would be things like luncheon clubs and play groups and all that kind of thing. And then try and identify how many hours of service are provided by individual people who are members of your church, doing it because they're part of the Christian community, who are serving other areas. So, for example, we had things like play groups identified and luncheon clubs and things of that kind. But also, in addition to that, there were a whole range of things, like some people would serve as Samaritans, some people would serve in debt counselling, citizens advice bureau, and all these kind of things. So this questionnaire went around to all the churches, and I think it's fair to say about 85% of the churches completed it. So it wasn't a total amount, but it was a good shot. And so what we then did was to tabulate the total number of hours each church contributed to the community. And then we added it all up. And then we costed it at minimum wage. It's quite something, really. Quite something. And then we had a meeting with the council and advised them of that. And what came out of that, one of the positive things was a recognition that, for example, if a local authority are going to put money into caring in the community, and they decide to put it in somebody's wage, what they get is what they pay for. If they decide to make it as a grant to a church or a caring authority, and that church engages a volunteer coordinator, they would probably get about 30 times as much than just paying the one person. Now, I think that's pretty good evidence for the need for closer cooperation between statutory authorities and voluntary agencies, especially churches. And if, as we work together, we can come a little bit closer to fulfilling the dream of a story about a Samaritan, it'll not be a bad thing. There we go.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you to Paul for those few reflections. What we're going to do now is just turn in groups of 2s and 3s, wherever you sat, and just have a conversation for just a few minutes about some of the things you've heard that Paul said. There'll be some things that he said that wouldn't surprise you at all. The 1 or 2 things you might think, I wonder about that. Let's a few minutes of conversation, then we're going to come back and have a panel.
Oh, no, man. You go this way.
Thank you all for your conversations. I'm sorry I interrupt them. Before we go to the panel, I just want to tell you one story. And I decided that I wouldn't tell you the story about Derby, because that would be unfortunate, because then it would look like I would be favouring one part of Derby over another, and I don't want to do that. So I want to tell you a story about another church in another part of our district. We had a new, bright, young Methodist minister come to be the minister. And he was unsure about the work that he was being called to do in this particular setting. So the church said to him, well, the thing is that we've been thinking for quite a while that we're so quite close to the centre of the town that perhaps what we should do is, even though the council only think there are 5 people who are homeless on our streets, actually we think that the number's a lot higher than that. And I wonder whether a couple of times a week we should just offer soup and a roll and give people who are on the streets a place to just come for if it's only about an hour. So that's what happened for about a year. That happened on Christmas Day, because Christmas Day happened to fall on the day that they always did it. So they said, yeah, we always have to do it. So they all went home for the Christmas dinner. After morning worship, came back, did the soup kitchen as they would do normally. About 3 or 4 months after the soup kitchen had been going for about a year, the minister found himself in conversation with a health visitor who said, do you know, I wish we could do something about helping some of the people who are homeless to have some better quality of life care in terms of their health. So she said, if I have a conversation with somebody in my team, do you think you could possibly do this at the church when the soup kitchen is on? So what happens now is, a few months on from that first conversation, now, once a month, there is 3 health professionals come to the soup kitchen. A health visitor comes, a GP comes, a physiotherapist comes, and an occupational therapist on another occasion. And also, on every week now, a district nurse comes. And they do things like looking after feet, because feet is a big problem if you're homeless. They make sure that the people that come are signposted to different agencies within the town. And as you would expect, the number of 6 is absolutely a lot more than that. And they get a lot more people coming. But that has been the impact of the church working with the local authority, who are also involved now, and the hospital in that particular area, to bring relief and to be Samaritans into that setting. I don't know what's going to happen with that. it might be for such a time as this. The minister's going to be moving next summer. I don't know what's going to happen to that. But what we need to do is think about the fact that those were strands of a situation where a need was seen, perceived, acted upon, and people are getting relief as a consequence. And I give thanks for people like that who are willing to engage together, enabling those of us who are less fortunate to live a better life, even if that's even on the streets. So Chris is going to come and do the next part of our togetherness. Am I sitting here?
Yeah. You are. Oh, are we all right on this one? Yep. So for those that don't know me, my name's Chris Briggs. I'm part of the Nottingham and Derby Methodist District, and my role within that is as something called District Mission Enabler. So we're going to have a little panel time. We're not pretending they've got all the answers. It's just to initiate discussion and conversation, really. But so you know we've got Reverend Paul Smith, and most of you will know Councillor Ruth Skelton, and hopefully now you know Reverend Lorraine Mellor as well. And my role is just to chivvy people along and say, have you got a question for them or a comment that they might like to comment on? And just to give you a tiny bit of thinking time, perhaps I can start off. And maybe we'll just work our way along the line. And given the context of Paul's address to us, and given what we've talked about in the conversation and that Bible reading as well, where we're looking at partnership and the opportunities and potential for that. Paul, in your experience, what have you found to be obstacles to partnership? Which will be the same question to all three, but that gives you two more thinking time.
Yes. The obstacles to partnership I think there are obstacles on both sides, really. I think on the church's side, the obstacles are difficult people. We've got a fair sprinkling in there. Difficult people who think it's always got to be as it always has been, and are pretty blind to the effect, to the situation in the community, and actually don't want to be disturbed. I think that we've got a lot of people like that. So we need to. That's the problem for the church. I think the problem for the other side is. I hope this is getting less, but councils thinking that care in the community is their preserve, really.
Thank you. Ruth?
Well, right. Well, we were talking a little bit about that earlier. I think perhaps 10 years ago, 15 years ago or so, before that as well, councils very much felt, whether it was youth work or social services, housing people and stuff like that, was very much the council's job, and
yes.
It was a statutory service, well, not all of it's statutory, but some of it is, and it was the council's job to do it, and that was it. And I think that way of thinking had also got out into the community as well, so people expect these things to be happening just as they've always happened.
And blame you when it didn't happen.
And then, people would, ask questions as to why it's not happening as it has been, obviously, particularly the last 10 years when finance has become tighter and tighter. And I think that tightening of the finances has made at least some people anyway start to think, well, we're going to have to do things differently. So I think it is an opportunity in a strange way. But, in Derby, we already, the council does work with Derby City Mission, particularly with the street pastors. They work with them, but also with night shelter that runs over the winter time. The results of those and other things have been very positive. So I think as councils can actually see that the work produced and the results in people's lives that are good, that it builds confidence, and they could become more willing to take you seriously, and establish a good partnership working.
Thank you. And Lorraine, any obstacles to partnership that you can think of?
Yes, people. The church, for a long time, thought that mission and evangelism was the prerogative of other people, not them. So consequently, what happened was some churches didn't think it was their role to get involved in caring for their people in the community. Church for them was about coming on a Sunday, worshipping, then going home again and coming back the Sunday after, not recognising that actually discipleship is about engaging in a disciple and being the places that Jesus would be. So sometimes it was an attitude of mine. There was also, from us, on a church's point of view, it was about people who thought that, well, we can rent out our rooms as a church, but we don't have to get involved in that. That's somebody else's job. And they didn't, and for me, people didn't understand what the gospel story, the one we've heard today, was. They thought it was about then, didn't think it was about now. So there's had to be, for us, a change in an attitude about what mission is all about. And then, of course, from other points of view, from people who we might want to enter into partnership with, and as far as I'm concerned, there's very few agencies that you wouldn't want to engage with. It was about, from their point of view, well, all it's about is they're trying to convert us. They want us to get bums on seats on Sundays, when actually the realisation is, for us, as Christians, it's about sharing the love of God. And often you find that when you sit round a table with police, education, health, various people, church, you actually want the same things for your local communities. You're just coming at it from different perspectives.
Thank you. So, let's see if there's any questions or comments, and we'll see. I don't want to pretend I'm like Fiona Bruce on question time, but we'll field them in different directions. Or maybe you just want to share a story or something like that. I'll run round with this. Mr. Mayor.
Hello. All right. We've got the Ninth Angel in Derby. Do you feel that the Ninth Angel will do things that possibly you'd like it to do or not?
Thank you.
Is this Flat Street Pastors?
The Ninth Angel is the...
Oh, the Ninth
These are the
Angel.
photographs I
Ninth
showed you
Angel.
yesterday, Paul.
I think this is an amazing thing. I've not seen it, but
So I think Paul's responding first.
I'm sorry. No. I think it's an amazing thing, yes, and I didn't realise...
It will have what they would like it to have. Sorry. Do you think it will have what they'd like it to have to reduce knife crime for everybody?
Well,
Get it in their head that they don't. Because since the Ninth Angel came to Derby,
yes.
throughout our country, there's been 17
Yeah.
knife crimes.
Yes.
17,
Yes.
which to me is a lot.
Yes.
Now, I want to know whether you feel that the Ninth Angel is there to do, and is going to do, the thing that we'd all like it to do, and stop this horrific waste of human life. Human beings are inflicted on other human beings. This sadness that we get.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know, really. I don't know what effect it's going to have. But what I do observe is that, a lot of our cities are wrecked by this kind of knife culture, really, and youth carrying knives and gang culture, and we need people to get under the surface of that, really. And in some London boroughs, that is happening with Christian youth workers who are set apart and who have got some finance, I think, to make that happen, because they're the people in the culture who are able to get into it. And I think that's far better, actually, than trying to engage somebody outside the culture to step in and put it right. We need folk in there.
Lorraine, perhaps in the room?
Yes. If you expect the Ninth Angel to have any impact by it just sitting outside the cathedral, then I think it's limited. However, I think if there is an awareness about why it's there, and the fact that, for me, the stewards that are stewarding are actually talking about it, they're actually saying about, go and look at the back and see the name of the person who was stabbed and killed in Derby. The name's there at the back of it. The stewards know about how many knives there are. They know about which parts of the country they've come from. So therefore, for me, it's about the stewards. So it's about awareness raising, really. And I think it's as Paul says, the Lighthouse in London is a very good example where at the Lighthouse, they have all the agencies together in one place.
Yes.
So that they're tackling it from a school's point of view for the children that are excluded. They're tackling it from a social work point of view from those children who are exhibiting different forms of mental and physical health. They're sort of looking at it educationally, socially, physically, all those sort of things. And also engaging them young people in youth activities. So in one place, they're tackling the whole of the issue. And I think that's where we're falling down in a lot of places, is that we're trying to deal with it in isolation. So it's not just about knife crime, it's about education, it's about social, it's about mental health issues, about all sorts of stuff. And what we've got to do together is work out what that means to work together. But I mean, I think that I'm going to see it this afternoon. But I know we've got a couple of people who've been stewards, and they've been telling us all about it this week. And so for me, it's about what they're doing, so that when people come and look at it, they're raising people's awareness about it.
Ruth?
Yeah, I've visited 2 or 3 times. One of the times I was there, somebody actually started speaking to me, who a friend of theirs had been stabbed in Derby and killed. So it was quite a poignant, difficult time for them, but they were obviously thinking through things. I think for some people it will have that sobering effect. I mean, just to look at the statue itself is quite profound, I think you would say. So I'm sure it will have an effect on some people. Whether it will on everybody, probably sadly not. But even, if it saves one life, it's worth doing.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And I guess at the very least it's raised the profile. We're talking about it here. Maybe we wouldn't have talked about knife crime. In some conferences I've been to, mainly London-based, about knife crime, it's been interesting there to hear some people from Glasgow speaking about some of the progress they've made.
Yeah.
Of course, the transition there was they began to treat it as a public health challenge, and that's helped them. And the other phrase which comes across to me from the conferences I've been to, again coming from Glasgow, is that they make a lot of what they call the coalition of the willing.
Yes.
So it's we're all, I think, grown up enough here to know that even when you want to work together, some people won't work with you.
Yes.
And the Glasgow attitude seems to be that will happen, so you work with who will work with you. The coalition of the willing. And that's the place to start. You just get together the people that will work together. And you start from there. That didn't seem about. Anyway, I'm not on the panel, so who would like to ask or say? Oh, sorry.
Yes, it'd be good perhaps to say where you're from or who you are or anything like that.
So my name is Dave Radcliffe. I worship here at LMC. I am a street pastor. I'm deputy chairman of Derby City Mission. And I also am one of the marshals at Knife Angel. So if you have a question about Knife Angel, give us a shout. 27 feet high, 5.5 tons. The one of the things I think about the Knife Angel is remember, but there is a police project going alongside it. I think it's Project ZOW, I think it's called. Yeah. So they are going into schools. And from a Derby City Mission point, the other piece is we're just about to trial and run out, when we get sorted, school pastors.
Yeah.
So street pastors going out on a Friday, Saturday night, we're going to try and put school pastors in
we do
to
that.
sort of engage with young people. So, thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
We do that.
Any other questions or comments? Mary?
So just to say something, Mary Radcliffe, I'm the lay pastor at St Martin's Methodist Church and Community Centre in Allerton. And my experience of a project in Allenton is that we're very blessed to have a city council here that are willing to work with a Christian organisation.
Great.
Because I've heard of other councils, because quite a lot of people have come to see the project, where they said our council wouldn't work with us as a church. So we're very blessed that Derby City Council is prepared to invest in Christian projects, really. With regard to St Martin's, Derby City Council didn't have any money, but they gave us the benefit of expertise in putting together our community centre. They gave us the benefit of a person to help us project manage. And at the end of the day, they had a vested interest, because my understanding is it's expensive, it's difficult for councils to run community centres now.
Yeah.
So they are really willing to help another organisation set up and run a community centre, because actually the hassle of it is down to us.
Yeah.
They help
That's
us
right.
do it and then say, well, now you get on with it. And they're still there if we want help. So there was no money, but they gave us a huge amount of expertise and are still there to support us in this venture. And it's great. And lots of Christians have said to me, how can you work with non-Christians? You know, is that not a bit of a risk? And we have partnered with, we have a very limited congregation at the minute, but we have discovered that if we partner with other organisations and non-Christian organisations, we can make our building into a really vibrant place, which has become this superb place for mission.
Yeah.
So it's partnerships, I think, is a fantastic way forward. And as I say, we're very blessed by Derby Homes and Derby City Council here.
Great. Really good.
Thank you. So panel, what would you say to someone that said either, from a council point of view, we don't want to work with those churches, how would you oil the wheels of partnership? Or to churches, what would you say to those that say, well, we don't want to get involved with these other bodies, with councils and things, because they'll end up making us compromise? How would you oil the wheels of partnership? Ruth, your turn to start.
Right. I think I might have, the initial response would be kind of don't cut your nose off to spite your face,
Yes,
really, on
that's
both sides. You know, be a lot more open-minded. Forget about stereotypes you might have heard from other places. Just open-mindedly go and meet these people, start building relationships, and you'd be surprised where it leads you.
And Lorraine?
Yeah, I would agree with Ruth. It's about relationships. It's about our local presbyters and deacons building the relationships in the communities. Like you were saying earlier, about where are the willing people? So finding the willing people. Now, the thing about this is, there will be some members of our congregations who won't like that. They won't like the idea of our presbyters and our deacons being seen in that sort of setting. But actually, they're the places where we need to be. We need to be building the relationships so that we can find out what's going on in our local context. Because if we sit in our churches Sunday by Sunday, we're never going to find out what's happening. We'll know what's happening in our street, our avenue, our road, but that'll be about it. And often then, these days, you don't know who your neighbours are. That's the reality of life today. You don't know who your neighbours are. And so therefore, we've got to purposely be in our roads, our avenues, wherever it is we live, and as churches, as disciples, we've got to build relationships with the people who've got the same aims as us, and that is to make life better for people, wherever we're found. So for me, the key has got to be about relationships.
Anything to add, Paul?
I think there's two things to say. I think the first one is there's a lot of fear around, actually. People don't like change. Both sides, actually. And people are afraid. People are afraid of launching into some areas that they don't quite understand and where it's a bit challenging and difficult, and, you know, dealing with these people is something out of their comfort zone and all that kind of thing. So there's a lot of fear around, and I think we need, as Lorraine says, you know, the way to overcome that is to build relationships. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. More questions or comments? Thank you.
I'm Lucy Kerr, I'm one of the councillors for this ward here. One of the things that has changed in the last 3.5 years has been a greater amount of antipathy towards people who appear to be different, often on a racial basis.
On a racial?
Yes, people who aren't one of us, people who have come from somewhere else in the European Union, and the amount of attacks that the police have been recording at the top end of that sort of iceberg, if you like, of activity has gone up. But there's also insidious comments at schools and elsewhere. What is the church's role in those relationships and in getting involved in the politics of Brexit?
We got through how long before we mentioned Brexit? Lorraine, let's start off with you.
Thank you for that. I think I wouldn't disagree with you. I think we're in a very sad situation. I found, when I first moved to the Midlands, I found the Midlands quite white, if I can use that term. I've lived in Africa. I lived in Lancashire, which was very multicultural. I did the first part of my ministry all in the northwest, and then I came to the Midlands, and I found it. I was looking for people that were different from me, but that I'd always had people surrounding me that were different. And it took me about 2 years to figure out the fact that I was in a place where the majority of people were white, and that really, it did something to my insides. And it took me a long time to sort of think to myself, what are we doing as a church to enable people to understand that we're all God's children, black, white, pink, yellow, whatever it is, whichever part of the world we come from. And so I think my own view has been to try and bring in my role as Chair of District, to try and bring in people, ministers particularly, but also lay workers now, who come from a different perspective than mine, be it both as an English white woman, but also from the perspective of different theologies as well. So even though the Midlands is very white, and the district that I serve is very white in terms of our makeup for our congregations, actually the percentage of our BME colleagues that are in the district in roles, senior roles, is actually quite high. And that's been very, very purposeful on our part. So that what happens is you widen people's perspective about what it means to be a person of the world as opposed to be a person of the Midlands. However, having said that, I'm dealing with a lot of coalfields areas. We've got a stream of coalfields that run all the way down our district, all the way through from Claycross to Uttoxeter. And those communities are very isolating communities. And they don't think to go over the hill to somewhere else. I mean, let's take Swadlincourt as an example. For people in Swadlincourt to go to Burton-on-Trent, or for someone to move from Swadlincourt to Burton-on-Trent, is a big deal. So we're not just dealing with the issue of black, white, whatever colour issues. We're also dealing with issues of culture and ingrained cultural attitudes. I think if you want me to go on to Brexit, I can, but I think I've probably spoken enough.
We let Paul have a go, and then Ruth can bring up the rear and tell us whether we've got it right.
Well, I now come from the West Country, which is very white. So it's a problem for us too. But I do think the church ought to be a place of reconciliation, and where people of different cultural backgrounds are valued as people. We now have, which is something which has come in the last few years, we have equality, diversity and
Inclusion.
inclusion
Yeah.
policies
We do.
in all our churches.
We do.
So this is a responsibility for the local churches to live up to that
It
standard.
certainly is.
And we have chairs of district who rap knuckles if these things don't happen. So on paper it's there, but we do need a change in attitude. I admit that. But the churches need to keep proclaiming the fact that we ought to be reconciling communities.
Right. Well, I suppose I'll start by saying that when I was a student, I lived in Germany, courtesy of the EU's Erasmus programme, which I found was not just beneficial for the subject I was studying, but also culturally beneficial, in the sense that you're living in a different culture, you're broadening your own horizons, and quite frankly, I think every young person should have the opportunity to do that. It changes you for the better, and I think that is incredibly important. And I know certainly with the EU, they do not just for students, but also for people studying at colleges, whether it's sort of plumbing or engineering or whatever. So there's more and more opportunities on that front. Obviously, they may or may not continue. It would be a big shame for them not to continue, because I think that would very much, I suppose, put Britain back into a mentality from the past, I think, which is just not helpful. The sort of saying, oh well, yeah, we've got it all right and we know everything, ours is perfect. And I think we perhaps had that before, probably in the 50s, and then obviously people came in and immigration started perhaps a bit more systematically into this country, and that has changed this country for the better. We, I think, are a far more outward-looking, broader thought than we were. Unfortunately, there seems to be a backlash at the moment trying to roll that back. So I think there is that kind of tug of war going on, culturally, spiritually. We go back to what Jesus said about, you love your neighbour as yourself. And then someone says, well, who's my neighbour? Actually, everybody is your neighbour.
Do you want to come back at any of that? And you mentioned young people in particular, didn't you, if I remember right, or schools or something? No, okay, I thought you. And what about the Brexit bit? They dealt with that? They sorted all that out for you?
I don't have a theological background. I'm a Quaker, but I've had conversations with people who say that the European Union is awful because of what it says in Daniel.
Dear me.
No, it's but people, the other people on the other side of the argument have that reaction, but I don't have the background to know why you have that reaction.
Okay.
And they have the opposite.
Okay.
But I'm not the one who needs to know.
No.
Those Christians who have that view that the European Union is
Satanic.
anti-Christ
Yes.
are the ones who need to know why not.
Yes.
And I have not yet found a pamphlet or a website that tells me what they need to know.
Okay. Can I respond to that?
Yes.
I think it raises two very interesting questions. One is about the way you use Scripture, and the other is about the way you change people's minds. And in terms of the use of Scripture, I think, well, maybe someone here will see it otherwise, but speaking for myself, I'm very concerned about people who will pull verses out of context and use them as a peg on which to hang their own view of current affairs. And clearly that seems to me what's happening here, and it needs to be challenged, but it needs to be challenged in a scholarly way. The problem is that the people who hold the view don't recognise the authority of the scholarship. So you've got a real problem, and which brings me on to the second issue, which is how are people's minds changed? And that's a big question, And it's a question in the political realm and the church realm and all these different areas that we've got to think about. And my response to that question is to say, broadly speaking, people are never changed by argument. They are changed by relationship. And certainly I can think of debates that are going on within the life of the church where I know people who have held a very strong view, and then because they've met somebody and begun a relationship with them and found out that they were not the ogre that they perceived them to be, actually the view has changed. But it's changed not because they've been argued into the change, but because the relationship has been established.
Thank you. I think we're going to be... Ruth, did you want to say something there?
Just sort of about, I suppose, how people can be changed. As the sign just above your head says, prayer changes things.
We want to honour the fact that we're going to end by 2 o'clock, so we'll begin to draw this to a conclusion. And we've looked at partnership work and how we can not walk by on the other side and what that means for us. And also, I guess we're conscious that there are deep divisions in society, and Brexit is one of those things that, whether you're for, against, or don't care, I think most people will acknowledge that it's caused deep divisions. And there's a real question there about the healing of the nation, isn't there? And how that might happen. And somehow, and I don't think the church is the only player in this, but I think the church does have a responsibility, somehow it needs groups, people that can be trusted to be seen to be working for the well-being of communities and society and individuals, and not taking a position because that's their groups and tribes' position. And I think we've become so tribal over it that trying to unpick some of that is going to be one of the challenges. I do think the church has got a role there, because we talk about a kingdom of God where barriers and boundaries are taken down. And so we have something to say. Whether we've said it well enough might be another debate, of course, but maybe that's what we're looking for across the community. I think we ought to say thank you to our learned panel, and perhaps, yes, and give them a round of applause, because frankly, that's all they'll get. They're not getting any pay. Saying that's all you're getting, the round of applause. No pay, I'm afraid. And I'm handing back to Lorraine, who I think is going to draw us to a conclusion.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much for coming today and for sharing in our Bible Festival. When we first thought about, when Chris suggested the idea of this, we weren't sure just exactly how it was going to pan out. But I know that today I found very stimulating, and thank you for coming and for sort of the questions that you've asked, but also the informal conversations that we've had as well that have been really helpful. We look forward to tonight when Paul will be sharing with us, and if you are free, then you will be very welcome to come and share in that. I also wanted to say thank you to Gary and Amanda and the team here in Littleover for hosting us this lunchtime. We're very grateful, Gary, and do pass on our thanks to everybody, Jane as well, and everybody else that's been involved. And thank you too for Tim and our technical people today who've enabled us to be live streamed on Facebook. And we're grateful for those people who've joined us. We got some comments yesterday and last evening. And I've also had different people be in touch with me this week about how much they've enjoyed being part of it, even though they've not been able to physically come here to Littleover. Thank you too for the very stimulating conversations and the questions that you asked for us as a panel. We were challenged by some of those things, as we all are. Whatever our role within society today, whether it's as councillors or as mayor or whatever it is, whether it's lay or ordained, volunteers or paid, we live in a very challenging world. We live in a very challenging culture where there's a lack of trust, where there's a lack of feeling of community, where there's a lack of people wanting to engage one with another. And I hope and believe that as partners, we can do something about that, that we can make our society a better place for people to live, a better place for people to be cared for, loved, and feel part of something greater. And so I'm just going to close with a short prayer. Gracious God, thank you for our opportunity to share together today. Thank you for all of us who've gathered to listen to each other and to grow closer in our relationship with each other. I pray that you will be with us in all that we seek to do as we seek to make a difference. Each of us gathered here today want that. We want to make a difference for people. So help us in our different ways to make a difference so that people feel loved and cared for. And bless us as we go in your peace and in your grace. Amen. Amen.